You ever wake up with external success, but you're still anxious and just feeling lost? Maybe you have a great societal identity, but you're unsure of your true identity. This applies to so many people. It applies to you. It applies to your team members. If you don't know it, it definitely does. And it applies to your children as well. And we talk about that. Scott had all the success imaginable, but he had to break down. He had to have a severe moment. He woke up one morning and something so extreme happened that he knew he made a change. We're going to talk about what he did, how he came through that, and what he's doing now, and what you can do to make that change too. So check it out. This was a great discussion. Hello and welcome to the Purpose Matrix. I am very excited for today's guest with some technical difficulties, but we are on our path to figuring it out. We hope. Scott McGohan. Scott, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that, Scott. We got introduced by a mutual friend. We're in for a treat today. Scott has a great background in business, but in leadership and coaching and consulting people and writing too. So co-chairman of McGohan Brabender, author of the book Culture is an Inside Job, which is absolutely like in my wheels. I love to talk about this self-awareness. There's a lot of great things we're going to talk about today. Co-founder and co-host of podcast called the Culture is an Inside Job podcast. And really what he's focused on, really passionate about right now, founder of One Morning, which I want to talk about that too for sure. But before we get into that and really what you're doing today, Scott, tell us a little bit of the backstory, kind of what guided your career, your path, and where you are today.
You know, right now, I just kind of, when I grew up, I grew up as a twin. So I have a twin brother. And, as a twin, you're just kind of fighting for your own identity. So, your mom kind of dresses you alike and, you're trying to figure out who you are. And so when I grew up, I grew up with a really warped sense of self-worth. I kind of grew it from a sense of performance. So the faster I went, told me that I was good enough, plus your opinion of me meant more than my own opinion of myself. And that probably kind of birthed itself when I was, probably, eighth, ninth grade. And then it never stopped. And that animal just grew. And, unfortunately, it led to some, success. So I was a full-blown chameleon. I was good at sales and I was good at a lot of things. But at the end of the day, I was just a big, gigantic fake. I started McGohan Brabender in sales, and I really enjoyed that and enjoyed, marketing. And, I got called on the carpet, and fortunately by a truth teller. And, then I kind of woke up. So that was a real gift. It didn't feel good, but it certainly was honest, and it certainly helped.
You said, so I want to talk a little bit. I wasn't planning on this, but we're going to get to it. So as a parent of 5 kids, you talked about, identity, performance, comparison. We deal with it. Our kids deal with this, and we deal with this in the workplace a lot as adults all over the place, right? How do we, maybe like from a parenting perspective, tell me more about not creating because you said, unfortunately, it led to success is what I heard you say. How should we be thinking about this performance culture comparison, and how do we adapt that to either our teams or our kids or whomever we're trying to lead?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with our kids, they most often do what they see, not what they hear. So, and I think as a parent, one of the greatest gifts we can give our kids is the view of a great work ethic. And a great work ethic is watching a strong mom and dad, do their roles really well. But also that can also be maybe kind of a hindrance too, where maybe work becomes more important than family. Yeah. But to answer your question directly, it would be to really make sure that, the kids are really doing what they deeply care about, and maybe not doing what we care about, So really begging the question, like, what really makes you happy? So is it art? Is it drawing? Is it writing? Is it if I was an athlete and I wasn't, my dad played college golf, and I was terrible at golf, and I'm still not that good. but I always wanted to be good at golf because my dad was good at golf, and I really struggled with that. And the thing is I just never, I never even talked to my dad about that. It's like, Dad, I'm not very good at this, but I kept working at it. And I think if I had to go back as a dad, and then my son played golf, he played high school golf, and he was a lot better than I was. But I think he played golf because I wanted to play golf. And I think more questions around, who do you want to be? What makes you happy? What brings you peace in your life? And I wish I would have asked better questions that way.
Well, and I think what you're saying too is, as a parent or as a leader, the more clear you are on who you are, what your identity is, just by getting clear on that, what your values are, that will have the more of an impact than what you're telling your kids about performance or comparison or anything else. If you're just content with what you're doing, if you're doing it for the right reasons, if you're working hard at that, that alone is the example you want to set for your team in the workforce, your team at home, the home team, the kids, whatever, whoever it is. So you talked about, so unfortunately it led to success. Now I also think, you say unfortunately, I think all things happen. These things are probably happening for a reason. So if we go back to your story, you had kind of an aha moment. Someone kind of gave it to you, told you how it was. You needed that. It hurt at the time, but you needed that. Tell me more about that process and what that led to.
Yeah. So I was, number one in sales. I'm a founder's kid, which is also, can be kind of dangerous because nobody wants to touch a founder's kid, And I had an assistant. Her name was Victoria. She was amazing. And she came in my office one day and said, "Hey, you have values painted on the wall. You don't exhibit one of them. I have my own set of values, and you torque them every day. Today is my last day." And I was more worried about, who else heard that? And then I was more worried about what people would think about her leaving than physically her leaving. And fortunately, by the grace of God, like that kind of bothered me. Like that's kind of a twisted, sick thought. And so I went back the next day and kind of said, "Hey, if I hired a coach and I gave you access to that coach, would you give me a shot?" And she agreed. And I hired a coach. His name was Pete Kunk. He's out of Columbus, great guy. And we just started unpacking, life together. And Victoria and I agreed to ask each other a question every day. Am I okay? Are you okay? Are we okay? In other words, are things moving in the right direction? And then, and honestly, this is probably a really long answer to a short question, but I didn't really have any faith back then. I thought God was a principal or a cop giving me a speeding ticket all the time. I had no idea that he could be a friend, right? I had no idea that, he could be gentle and kind. And I thought I had to go to church boarding school to meet him, because I thought I was such a heathen. And I had so much guilt and shame. And I met this really unbelievable grace-filled church. And, I met this God that showed me that the mirror's a wonderful place to find a friend. And, that just kind of changed my life. And it just put me on a different path. And I really got to go back to meet this like 8-year-old kid that was pretty happy with himself. And I got to go back and maybe shake his hand and say, "Hey, let's start all over. Let's start all over in this treehouse and let's rebuild the life maybe that you wanted to build, and not build it on society's shoulders. Let's build it on your shoulders."
I want to kind of stay there and talk about society. You referenced that, I think Victoria, I have the name right, was thinking about leaving, and you were more worried about what other people thought. So we're society, what other people think. We're talking about ego here, I think, a little bit. And you talk about that in your book specifically. You have a whole chapter dedicated to it, actually. So tell me more about what should our awareness of our ego be? How should we use that? Or should we be afraid of it? Or just it's human nature. So just tell me more about ego, how you think about it.
Yeah. It can be a useful tool. It can be really useful and it can be helpful, but it can be lethal. It's super dangerous. And for me, I have to look at my ego and I have to look at pride and I have to look at it and I have to discern when I'm selfish with my ego when I'm dishonest with my ego, because I can manipulate, right? I can say, well, I'm doing this because it's for everybody's best interest. And then that's just a gigantic lie, but I can make it sound really good. When it's self-seeking and when it's dishonest and it's self-seeking and it's selfish, then I know it's the wrong motive. It's not authentic and it's wrong. But for me, I have to actually physically write it down. Like I have to pin it.
Yeah. I was actually just going to ask that because I think this is, I think it's so important to ask yourself these questions. These questions can be very much done. And I would encourage you to ask these questions to yourself in private, by yourself, with a pen. And like, am I doing this because this is what I think other people want me to do? Am I doing this because what I will get in society out of this? Or am I doing because true at my core, in my heart, I think this is the right thing to do. And it's for the right reasons. And only you can answer that question. Only we can answer that question for ourselves. But just if you don't have the practice of writing or journaling, I'm sure Scott, we haven't even talked about this, but I trust that you do. If you don't have that habit, what a extremely powerful habit. Just to, start small, start to write something, ask yourself some basic prompting questions like, am I doing this for the right reasons? Or am I not doing these things for the right reasons?
Yeah. I think, Phil, too, you're right, because if you don't, they stack. So if you don't do that, then what happens is all these events end up on your shoulders in a backpack, and then your life just gets heavy. And what sucks is you'll remove that stuff and you'll throw those rocks, but normally you'll throw the rocks at your kids and your family. You'll throw it at the people you love because you're afraid to throw it at the people that they deserve. And that's a horrible way to live. But when you clean it up every day, then you live free and you have peace. Now I still make tons of mistakes, all kinds of mistakes, but I make a lot less today than I did before. And I don't have to carry yesterday into today. I just don't have to.
I absolutely love the analogy. If you're listening, you can truly feel the weight of it. How else? So journaling, writing, how else do we clean it up? You said clean it up every day. How else do you clean it up every day?
There's this learning circle. So on the right side, it's observe, reflect, and discuss. So that's when we kind of admit that things are going on in our head. And on the left side, it's where we talk and we have accountability and we take action. The problem with society is we always stay on the right side. So we observe, we reflect, and we discuss, and we do that all in our head. And just think about the conversations you have, like in your car when you're all by yourself, right? The arguments you have with humanity, right? You win every time. And you just turn into a hot mess. Nothing really changes until you get that gunk out of your head into somebody else's ear. And you have an honest conversation around, hey, this is what's going on in my noggin. And you get that stuff, that junk out of your head. And then someone with discernment kind of says, hey, look, this is what I think you should do next. So that's accountability.
Yep.
Right. And then you take action on that and then you move. And what that does is it creates a flywheel. Right. And then all of a sudden in life, what you learn is, hey, when I get that observe, reflect, discuss, I don't have to live on that right side. I can fly to the left and I can move. And you don't have to get stuck there. So many people get stuck on that right side. I've always heard that, someone told me a long time ago that your brain's like a bad neighborhood and you shouldn't live there alone. We shouldn't live there alone.
Yeah.
You need a truth teller. You need people in your life that you trust. You can have great conversations with. Right. And that's probably the best advice that I have for people.
Yeah, I've heard it before where if you're taking a walk and you're walking with someone and they're just constantly in your ear talking negative to you, all the things you're going to do wrong, what all this and that, and just it's 80% negative in your ear. You're never going to keep hanging out with that person. But this is how we treat ourselves. This is how we do this. And if we don't have a practice to clean out the garbage, to clean, however you said it, to clean up every single day, to get rid of that, all that excess weight. If we don't have a process for that, it's just going to keep stacking up and stacking up and stacking up. And that's not a free way to live. It's not going to give you contentment and peace ultimately. So if we go back, so you had these tough conversations, you really started to understand, your ego, like what was at your core. Bring the rest of the story out here.
Yeah. So my coach really kind of helped me understand, hey, what was important to me? And then sadly, what was really important to me were material things. I was like, holy smokes. And then it really started to help me understand what was really important to me. And then sadly, I didn't even put myself on that list because I had so much shame and guilt. When that became important, when a relationship with me became important, that really began to change things. Because I thought that was selfish. I thought caring about me was selfish. And man, is that a twisted thought? But
right.
You know what? I guarantee you, I know I'm not alone in that thought. So to bring life to that is really, really important.
Do you think people that what's really important to them is material things? Do you think that's just a lack of understanding, like a misunderstanding, or they just they haven't gone through the exercise to really understand what's really, really important? Because it sounds like once you dug in and yes, okay, material things were important, you said, but as you really dug in and did the inner work and self-reflection and had a coach guiding you, you figured out, okay, these things can do some things for me, but what's really important for me are relationships, faith, my self-worth, who I am, taking care of myself, it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, someone told me, comparison is the thief of joy. So if you're not willing to go inside, you'll stay outside. So staying outside means I look at Phil, I look what you have, and if I don't have it, I want it. And I just stay outside my whole life. And I'll work my tail off to get what Phil has. And when I get what Phil has, guess what? I find somebody else that has something. And then I just keep working and working and working. And what happens is my hands stay busy my whole life because I'm not willing to stop and go inside of my head and my heart. And then one day I wake up and it's a pretty lonely world. And if you just stop and you just realize that it's okay to stop, it's okay to slow down, it's okay to take a break, it's okay to tell people that you're not okay. It's okay to show vulnerability. It's okay to say, I don't have all this figured out and I'm lonely and I'm tired and I'm broken and I'm afraid and I don't know what to do. That's okay.
What's interesting about this is that I talked to a high school leadership class last week, and it was one of my main messages is that, first of all, don't be so this is you're saying all the reasons here that society and human beings are broken and hurting and struggling and anxious, have anxiety, and this is really true, especially in today's society when we have social media and so many other mechanisms and forums and platforms to compare to other people, which is, as you said, a thief of joy. But my message was if you also have to give yourself some grace here because you are human and everyone is dealing with this stuff. Everyone, Scott and I are both, we are dealing with this stuff. We work on it a lot maybe, but we are dealing with this stuff all the time too. So don't be too hard on yourself. And how do we balance that? How do we balance, maybe this is a good transition to culture as an inside job and really building self-awareness. How do we balance self-awareness and grace a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, once you begin to unpack that, you'll realize that you spent most of your life really in a self-sabotaging world. You actually which is really bizarre. You actually started taking apart yourself in a really narcissistic way. And you're exactly right. I mean, but if you can't, even the good book says to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, if you can't love yourself, you can't love your neighbor.
Right. That was actually a reference that.
Shot. And then, the other thing too, which is really cool is if you can't encourage yourself, you can't encourage others. right? If you can't forgive yourself, you can't forgive others. So there's so many people that you just have to begin to understand how to be really, really gentle and kind to yourself. When you're kind to yourself, you can be kind to others. When you encourage yourself, you can encourage others. When you can do that to yourself, you can carry that to other people, because we're all broken. We're all beautifully made, but we're all going to make mistakes. You're going to make a mistake today, Phil. I'm going to make one. 100%. I just hope I can, I always say, try to put a good decision sandwich together, 2 good decisions in a row. That's always a good day, because you're going to make a bad one.
Yep, for sure. First of all, I was thinking about the love your neighbor as yourself, because it says love your neighbor as yourself, not love your neighbor more than yourself, not love your neighbor and not yourself. It doesn't say, it says as yourself. So I think building that through exercise, through practice, through principles, through writing, self-reflection, quiet time, things like that. So culture is an inside job. So there was clearly a journey that you went on, and Ed Milet talks about this a lot. Like, we are the most qualified to help people that are like our former ourselves too. So I will also say that if you're going through challenging times and struggles and situations where it's like we're going some different things from a work perspective right now. It's like, we are like in it. Like, it hurts sometimes. Like, there's some crap, right? It's like, man, we're learning and we don't even know everything yet. But like, when the tide is out, like, so that it's creating us to take action, create new relationships, things like that, but we're in it, right? So from a personal perspective, you've gone through that yourself to figure these things out. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I just am qualified to write this book because I just had it all figured out from age 8 and beyond. No, you went through this process. So tell us more about the book and like the kind of some of the major messages, and then even self-awareness. Like, how do we take action to build self-awareness?
Yeah, I think, I wanted to write the book and not talk about all the great things that I did, because I'm really proud of a lot of things that I did over my career. But I didn't learn a lot of great things under the wonderful things that I did in my career. I learned a lot when I made a lot of mistakes. So that's really what that book's about. And that book has a lot to do with individual culture, because I believe what's most important in an organization is not the outward culture, it's the inward culture of who you are. Do you really understand who you are on the inside? And it takes time. I wrote a poem one time called "Never Alone, Always Lonely." So if you're uncomfortable alone, then that means you probably need to explore. And one good exercise is this. So pretend you're at a cookout or an event with a bunch of people, and you're physically not there, but you can hear every conversation. You're above it all. And someone walks up to somebody that you know really well and says, "Hey, you work with Phil?" And they said, "Yeah." And they say, "Tell me about Phil." And then what I want you to write down is, I want you to write down what they would actually say about you. Like, what they would actually say. And then the gap is what you would want them to say. Now, get really honest about that. Like, if someone was going to be really honest about who Scott was, this is who he is, Now, he's kind of fake. He's never on time, whatever, And to get super honest about what you would want them to say. That's the gap. And then you got to figure out, how do I go from here to here? And then you got to figure out, do I want to go from here to here? And the most important part is, society is always going to want you where you were. They're always going to want you where you were, because change is really hard. And if you pull that thread all the way through, there's some really cool stuff on the other side, but it takes work. It takes a lot of work.
Tell me more about why society wants us where we were.
Gosh, you know what I mean? I think, sadly, you ever heard the phrase first or worst? I don't want to be the first at something or the worst. It's like this middle ground, and we roll along, and it's like, I don't want to be the worst at anything. I don't want to be the first at anything. As long as I'm in this middle pad, and Phil too. I mean, we live in this gossip world, this comparison world. Society really wants brave, courageous people. Society really wants somebody that's going to stand up for other people. Like if you're in an organization and something's happening wrong in your organization, I don't care if you're the CEO or you're the receptionist. If you got the courage to stand up and call that, people want leaders. You don't have to have a title to be a leader. People want people to stand up. Stand up. Be brave. Stop staying in the middle. Just stop staying in the middle. Stand up and be brave, because the middle just sucks. And there's just so many people in that middle.
And I think there's probably two people, two types of people maybe in society. And if society is like, if we live in a comparison society, which we've all agreed we do, then people that are watching you, and they, like, as you said, they want you where you were, because they don't want you to pass them necessarily, right? Because then that sets them back. Certain people want that. They might want that, because if they're thinking, working, acting out of ego themselves, of course, they're living in the external world. So it's a world of comparison, and they want to be ahead of you, perhaps, right? And there's truth to that, but also I think what's more important is, especially the people, even if you want, I don't even know how this is going to come out, but if you want to have an impact, or like, if you're worried about what other people are seeing, what they really want to see, and the people that you're going to respect, what they see, what they really want to see is courage, is authenticity, is boldness, right? They're rooting for you. They're cheering you on. They're saying, oh yeah, go higher, have more of an impact, be a bigger person, whatever it is. And they're, because they're not living in comparison as much. So, and honestly, that's who you have to surround yourself with. Like, you have to find yourself around more people that are rooting you on and want you to be courageous, maybe that are being courageous themselves. So I think that's important, but I think it's an important distinction, because it's confusing. I mean, society is a comparison society that, like, they might say they're rooting for you, but are they really rooting for you? But it is true that people that are following you in your workplace, like, they want bold, courageous leadership. And it's so important. You do not have to have the title in your organization, on your team, to stand up for what is right. Now, you don't have to holler at the top of the mountaintop and be loud about it, but you gotta stand up for what is right. And it's what's interesting in the corporate world. I feel like earlier in my career, when I was more worried about title and where I was going and things like that, I was less authentic, and I probably had less respect for that. Later in my career, when I was on a different path, I was still leading, but I knew I was going to pursue the path of real estate. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to worry about what people think. I don't have an agenda or anything else, like any titles I want. I'm just going to be like, I want to tell my boss or whoever what I think, and I'm going to be more authentic. And guess what? Because of that, they asked me to do other things, right? Like, we need bold, courageous leadership in our society more than we ever have before. So this is a fun topic. I want to talk about, I want to bring it back a little bit. We talked about comparison, just all the stuff we're talking about. But mental health and anxiety is, it's important to you. It's near and dear to your heart. And I think it's more of a risk, more of a real thing in society than it's ever been. Just tell me more about it.
I learned that the hard way. 18 years ago, I founded a company called One Morning. So One Morning, hence the name of the company. One morning I woke up and, I didn't want to live. And I had everything. Probably from society's viewpoint, homes, cars, stuff. And, I walked in the recovery rooms in Montgomery County and said, "My name's Scott, and my soul's cooked." And I was just lost and tired and broken and afraid. And during that journey, I began to learn that it was okay to not be okay. And that discovery really helped me understand, one, I wasn't alone, and two, the fact that, I was allowed to have anxiety and depression, and I was allowed to be there, and I didn't have to be ashamed of it. So, they always say the bottom is a beautiful place to be as long as you know you're there. So, and I was able to climb, and I hid from that story for a long time. And then I decided to tell that story to our workforce. And then I asked other employees, hey, can I tell your story? And I had a bunch of people willing to tell their story about anxiety, depression, domestic violence, other things going on in their lives. And what I learned is everyone's got something going on. And I don't think we suffer as much from a lack of resources in this country. I think what we suffer from is a lack of acceptance. I mean, I think if everybody rose their hand and said, I'm going through this, or I've gone through this, I think the tools and the resources are actually inside the rooms of our organization. I mean, we're dealing with Alzheimer's, parents, grandparents. We're dealing with kids getting bullied at school. 42% of Americans today are afraid to look at their checkbook because they can't afford the next bill. In other words, 42% of Americans are afraid of their mailbox. I mean, so there's all kinds of stuff, and we're hiding all of that stuff. We're hiding from it. And we hide it all through clothes. We hide it through vanity. We hide it through makeup. We hide it through our cars that we drive. Sometimes we can't even afford. I mean, we're just masking all of it, and we don't have to. We can just bring life to it. And so one morning, what I want to try to do is just break the stigma, which is a terrible word, by the way, and bring a sense of belonging to struggle in a beautiful way, and let people know that, man, it's just okay not to be okay. And we can help each other. And vulnerability is one of the greatest gifts in the world. It is the greatest gift in the world. I had an employee tell me one time, you're way too vulnerable. It makes you look weak. And I told them that might be the weakest thing I've ever heard. And they said, I don't understand. I'm like, I know you don't. That's why I said it. But be vulnerable, because it lets other people know that they're not alone.
And I want to ask about maybe how do we start this process? Because if let's say I'm an introverted person and I'm not vulnerable, I'm not willing to talk about this stuff. How do I start? So I'll come back to that, but my comment on vulnerability is so first I've heard, if you name your fears, like to tame your fears, name your fears. If there's something on your mind and you tell one person about it, just try that. You're going to feel so much better about it. Like if there's something on your mind, gosh, there's so many different places I want to go there because it's so good. But we're like the lack of acceptance. Actually, I want to ask about that. Lack of acceptance. Is that lack of society's acceptance of us, or is that a lack of our own acceptance? Like, are we not accepting ourselves?
Oh, it's 100% ourselves. Yeah. If we would just bring light to it, it'd be okay, because the person next to us would be like, yeah, thank you. I got stuff going on. Or they would just lie and say they didn't, because everybody's got something.
Right. But they have something. Like if you're listening to this and you're like, I know I have something, but no one else has something. So is everyone else that's listening. They're also saying the same thing. It's like, oh, I have something. But so who should I talk to, Scott? I mean, okay, great. But like, am I going to go to my spouse, my coworker? Like, I got this baggage. I got these rocks on my back that are just weighing me down. This is not an easy thing to just go do.
Yeah. I mean, I think inside of everybody needs a truth teller. So I had Victoria. So she was my truth teller. And by the way, she retired at McGohan, which was awesome. Fantastic. So everybody needs a truth teller. And I would always say, like, you ever played tennis? So when you play tennis, you always want to play tennis with somebody better than you, right? So you get better. So if you're looking for a truth teller, look for somebody that you know is going to tell you the truth. Look up. You should be a little intimidated by the person you ask, right? Don't ask somebody that's going to be amiable and just always going to agree with you. Like, hey, can you tell me the truth? If something happens in a meeting, you're going to call me on that. And that's a good thing to do in the workplace. Your kids are never going to tell you the truth, because if they do, they're going to lose their car keys and their cell phone and all that stuff. So that's a bad path. But, I think it's important, a good friend, a really, even us as men, I mean, we spend way too much time talking about the Bengals and the Reds and all that stuff. If you just had a conversation with with a buddy about, hey, what's going on with your kids? I mean, you'd be shocked how fast a conversation would happen about a marriage, about a relationship, about their dad or their mom or something that's going on in their life. Just just break the crack. Just break it just a little bit. And you said like you're an introvert, and I'm not. I'm like Tigger, man. I'll bounce around the room. I'll say anything to anybody.
It depends who you ask, but for the introverts out there that are struggling with how do I really go talk, like I'm not going to go, like they're terrified of this conversation and having a conversation like this. Yeah.
It'll change your life though. Because here's the problem. You're having that conversation with yourself and you're getting some really bad answers, and it's actually hurting yourself, and you're not growing because of it. So if you want to grow, go outside yourself and ask people, ask them for help, and ask them for advice, and ask people a lot older than you, because people a lot older than you're intimidated by. Actually, you'll be shocked how bad they want to help you. How bad they want to help you. Because they're going to look at you as like their grandkid. They will lean into your life like you have no idea. You can pick up the phone, whether you're in Dayton, Ohio, Columbus, Coldwater, St. Henry, call a CEO of a company and just say, can I have a cup of coffee? You'd be shocked how fast that CEO would say, I would love to have coffee with you.
Yep.
No agenda. I've heard wonderful things about you, and I just want to meet you. Would you mind? And you'd be shocked. They'd say, absolutely.
We haven't talked about fear, but it is, I asked a fear-based question, like, what are people going to think? Or I'm not going to go do that. And I want to come back to that, but just like your network, your associations, who you talk to, like it's really, really important. Scott's talking about that, but I just say that like to kind of close the loop on authenticity, vulnerability. Just try it. Start a conversation with someone and just share more than you normally would, or ask different questions than you normally would. And you're probably going to find the person that is going to, they're going to open up there, because you're going to be like, holy cow, Scott shared that with me. Like I'm going to share as well. I want to just have one conversation, just try this somewhere. And it doesn't need to be, you're going from a level, if your relationship is a level 2 vulnerability now, don't go to a level 10, but go to a level 3 and a level 4 and keep moving in that direction and you'll get there. So I think that's so important. And I think you talked about courage, but the opposite to me, fear is a lot of times our mind holding us back, and courage is our heart telling us what we need to do. But how much does fear, like, what are you afraid of? How much does fear hold us back?
Oh, when I get fear, I feel it. Well, actually, your body is your first signal. So your body will tell you what's going on. If you understand what triggers your body, so where anxiety comes from, where depression comes from, where fear comes from, where anger comes from. So if you dig into that, there's a lot of good studies. And I know where anger comes from. Where anger comes from, for me, it comes in my neck. So what's important is, like, I can feel it in my neck. So when I feel it, I know I have a choice right when I feel it. Am I going to get pissed or not? So I get in front of it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a choice. So with fear, my heart begins to beat. And that means I got to take action. Like, I'm afraid of something. Now I have a choice. So I can move into it. And when I normally move into it, when I move through it and not away from it and run, then amazing things happen. And incredible things happen when I move through it and not move away from it. But I can feel it in my heart, get this like nervous energy, like you're walking on a stage right before you speak. It's like, oh boy, here I go. Right. I can feel it. I got to move. I got to move. And when you start to understand that, you can get in front of all that stuff. But a really good thing for fear, and I learned this in recovery, is to make a fear list. Write down like 50 things that you're afraid of. Now, here's what you're going to do. The first one's going to be like, I'm afraid of spiders. I'm afraid of snakes, and I'm afraid of heights. And you get further down that list, and, you'll start to recognize really the things you're afraid of. I'm afraid of being exposed. I'm afraid of my wife finding out that I'm fake. I'm afraid of my kids, knowing that I'm not a good dad. Like, you walk through that fear list and you get deep into that, you'll really start to explore what fear really is. It's not heights. It's not spiders. I'm afraid of bankruptcy. I'm afraid of divorce. I mean, you start really unpacking fear. And then when you write that, I agree with you too, Phil, when you pen that, you put that on a piece of paper, it becomes real. When you leave it up here, it gets lethal. You put it on a piece of paper, it becomes real. And really cool stuff can happen through that.
Yeah, I'm going to try that exercise, because I've also heard, like, if you write this down, my guess is that as you write down 30, 40, 50 things that you're afraid of, that you fear, you're probably going to realize there's some things on that list that you have to take action about, right? Like, I'm afraid of that. So first of all, I should have a conversation with somebody about this, right? And second, I have to take action. I have to do something about this. So I love this conversation. I mean, truly, culture is an inside job. I love the one morning story, and I don't love that it happened, but I love that you're using what happened to you, to have an impact on a lot of people and do great things. Tell us more about One Morning and how people can find out more about that.
Yeah. Go to onemorning.com. You can email me at Scott at one morning. And, I deeply care about it. It means a lot to me. So I just believe that more help means more hope for people.
Yep. Awesome. And Scott, I want to ask you, so as you think back to your story, your career, book, podcast, what you're doing now with One Morning, step back and reflect. How does what you do, how does it make you feel?
Gosh, I mean, today I get to look back and say that, I'm authentic today. I don't have one mask on the golf course, one mask at church, one mask in a bar, one mask at a conference, one mask on a stage. Today I'm one person. And when I got out of my own way, things really changed. Things really, really changed in a really healthy way. I mean, what I'm most proud of is, I'm married 38 years to my best friend. Her name's Lori. Got 4 grandkids. We should have had them first. And 2 kids.
I like that. And, I can't say that yet, but I like that.
Yeah. And then I've got five foundations that I believe in, then I'll stop talking. But number 1 is my faith is my foundation, and I will not waver. Number 2 is my wife, and I'll never part. Number 3, this is really important. I am my own worst enemy, and I know it. Number 4, all people, minus deep mental health, are good and just need to be reminded that they're loved. Number 5, I will do everything in my power to find the lonely, tired, broken, and afraid, and give them hope. Those are my 5 anchor points, and that's how I'll live.
What I like about that, first, I want to talk about that, because I think what's so important is, if you listen to that, the clarity in knowing that, and that wasn't like you just came up with that real quick. Like, you've thought about that, you've written that out, you've really done the inner work to figure that out. But also, you didn't say, here's this first item in the success or societal or what this needs to look like what you have in that. No, these are the items, and this is how I'm going to live. Because when we tie this back to the very beginning of the conversation in identity, and I talked about with the high school kids last week, but your identity is how you live. It's not the results. It's not what happens to you, because we all have things that have happened to us in society, in our upbringing, in our careers, in our families, in our marriages, whatever. And we all have results of what we have, but that's not who you are. Who you are is how you live. That is who you are. So what Scott just did is he just communicated to us who he is. And that is guiding how he lives. He's got what he just talked about is that, not the results, exterior, none of that stuff. It's just at the core, who Scott McGohan is. You got to know him today. And he just told you right there at the very end, like that is who he is at his core. And I love that so much, the clarity of knowing it. And just the contentment, you can see the contentment of knowing who you are with no stress, no worry, no, like, this is who I am. This is authentically who I am. This is what you're going to get, and take it or leave it. But that's Scott McGohan. So I love it so much. This was an absolutely fantastic discussion. I appreciate it so much. We did have technical difficulties before the show. So Scott has been by the way, I'm also fighting a cold, so I canceled him a couple of days ago. So Scott has been so gracious and patient with me. He's going here in a little bit to a big event he's speaking at too. So he's got a lot on his mind, and he's really, most importantly, using his story to have a great impact on people, truly saving lives. I've heard it from others directly, how he is truly saving lives from anxiety, depression, other things that can be fixed. You have to do the inner work to do those. But Scott, I just appreciate it so much. Any parting words for the listeners?
Phil, thanks for everything you're doing to just bringing light to leadership, and especially for the next generation, and leaning into kids. And I just appreciate everything you're doing. And it was just a real pleasure being with you this morning.
I enjoyed it so much, Scott. Thanks. And definitely check out onemorning.com. I will put that in the show notes for sure. Check out Scott, the great work he's doing. Get him as a speaker at your company, wherever. He is fantastic. I heard he's the most engaging speaker there is out there. So Scott, thanks so much for coming on for the Purpose Matrix. Signing off.